All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Anastasia Hardison. I'm a customer relationship manager with the Electronic Research Administration with NIH. One of my projects is the prior approval module, which is new and has been in production now for just over a year. And I wanted to go ahead and give everyone a quick presentation about it. Prior approval. Within NIH policy, we're able to give our grantees a certain level of discretion when making changes to their budgeting or their grants-related activities, which is great. However, some of these changes we actually do need to sign off on, and therefore grantees need to be able to submit documentation from this request. Right now, these requests are coming in through email. They're coming in by contacting the grants management and program staff, and each IC has a slightly different process. So what we did was we looked at some of the challenges that we were getting, both internal and external, and we came up with the prior approval system. So what this is going to give us is the ability to streamline this, to have transparency as to what kind of documentation we want, and ensure that we get the signatures from the signing officials before these requests come in. Also, the benefit of this is that if your institution is using the prior approval system for the requests that we support, you'll be able to do a search and see if a request has come in from a different department or from a different signing official. So right now, one of the things to keep in mind with this is optional. You don't have to use this process. You can continue to submit your requests the way you normally have in the past, or you can choose to go this way. Right now, we support 4 request types. The request to withdraw an application. This one is special. Both the PDPI or the signing official can initiate this request, but only the signing official can submit it. The remaining 3 are post-award requests. There is the request for Nocost Extension that requires prior approval, request for change of PDPI, and a request to carry over funds for a grant without expanded authority. These can only be worked on by the signing official at this time and must be submitted by them. So when you come into prior approval, when you come into ERA Commons, you're going to see a new tab available to you called Prior Approval if you're a signing official. When you come in there, you have the option to initiate a request type on the left, and you also have the ability to perform some searches on the right. So on the right side, as the signing official, you'll have the option to list my requests, and what this is going to give you is all of the requests that are currently pending submission from a signing official. The search is going to give you the ability to search for any and all prior approval requests that have originated, from your organization. So you can search for things that are in progress, things that have been submitted, etc. When you select Initiate Prior Approval Request, you'll pick the type that you want to start, and we're going to run a query and display any grants that are eligible for that request type. You'll pick the grant from the hit list and click Initiate. Also, since I know some of you have lots and lots of grants that might be eligible for a particular request type, you can search by the PDPI or you can search by the grant number as well to winnow down the results. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the withdrawal request. This is going to be for any grant applications that are outside the 2-day viewing window where you can reject an application. It can be started by the PDPI or the signing official, and remember, this is the contact PDPI that can do this. The signing official is going to submit, and here we have the screen. It's very straightforward. We pre-populate all of the information that we're going to need in order to send it on to the Division of Receipt and Referral. You put in a justification, you can upload PDF documents, and then you can submit. Also, with this, once again, this is optional. If you run into any challenges with this for some reason, please contact the service desk, but then also go ahead and submit your withdrawal request to Division of Receipt and Referral if you're close to deadline, just so that there's not any delay. The other ones are the post-award requests, like I mentioned earlier. These are only for only signing officials can work on these at this time. And the first part, all of these have a header. It has the grant information there. And most importantly, one of the things that I think will be very helpful is that we display the grants management specialist and the program official up in the header. So you know right away who you need to contact if you have any questions about this request or about any documentation. This information is pulled off of the current the current grant year. So change of PDPI, this is to add a program official, replace a program official, change who your contact program official is. They are only available on the current grant year, and you will have the opportunity to put in an effective date. So if it's for the next grant year and you want to submit it, just put in when it's supposed to take effect. So there is a table. When you start the request, you'll have a table. We'll show you who is currently on the grant, and then you'll be able to either add folks or you'll be able to remove someone. So if you have an MPI grant, someone is leaving, you can initiate this request and just delete them from the grant. We're going to ask you to upload a bio sketch and an other support for every PDPI that's being added. And then we'll also ask you for level of effort. The logic for this level of effort is identical to that of the RPPR. So it's following the same principle that should be familiar to everyone. If it's an MPI grant, we'll also ask you for a leadership plan and then also the justification document. Once this is all filled out, you will be able to submit the request and it'll go to your grants management and program official. We have no-cost extensions requiring prior approval. The thing to remember with this is not the freebie no-cost extension request that you have in status. So if your grant is eligible for that extension, you will not be able to submit a prior approval request because you don't need one. At that point, you'll fill it out and it'll automatically do this. This one is actually going to go and be reviewed by your grants management and program staff, and it obviously asks for more information. This applies for any grants that have already had a no-cost extension, any grants that don't have an expanded authority, or if you forgot to submit a no-cost extension and your project period end date passed. So that was one of the things that we'd heard was occasionally folks forget, and the day after the project period ended, oh no, I need to submit one. Here you can do it through the system. And if you've, if you have expanded authority, you haven't had a no-cost extension, it's before the project period end date, go ahead and do it through status. So these can be done 90 days before the project period end date. We're going to ask you for the number of months, the unobligated funds, justification, a progress report, and a budget. If the grant has been closed already, you can't submit a no-cost extension request through Commons, and also this does not apply to fellowships. So very straightforward. Once again, it's a drop-down for the number of months. We'll recalculate things for you, and then everything else is PDF uploads. Last but not least is the carryover request. It's the most recent one that we implemented a few months ago back in the spring. So this is if your grant does not have expanded authority and you wish to carry funds from one budget period to the next. You can only submit this request on the current budget period to pull funds into it. If you're pulling funds from year 1 and you're in year 4, the request is going to be started on year 4. Once again, only signing officials. And if you're in the final year of this grant, you're also going to be asked if you wish to submit a no-cost extension. So if the grant is within 90 days of project period end date and you want to do a carryover request, we will give you the opportunity to say yes. Once the request is submitted, you will be taken to the no-cost extension screen. With this, also, if you miss your project period end date, you will have to submit the no-cost extension request before you can do the carryover. So, and then also I went ahead and I included resources for the service desk. We have a lot of really good training materials online, some videos, and some articles of items of interest that you can see. And then service desk information. Yep?
On the carry-forward request, is it going to validate whether an FFR has been submitted? Or
we do not.
Okay.
The FFR, the question was, do we validate to see if the FFR has been submitted? And we do not. So we do strongly encourage you to make sure that the FFR was done. At this time, though, there is not a validation. Yes?
I might have misheard you when you were talking about Carryover Request, but I thought you said that it can be done within 90 days before the end date.
So you can do the carryover request at any time. But if you're within 90 days of the project period end date,
After.
if you go after the project period end date, we'll request that you have submitted, we'll check to see that there was a no-cost extension request submitted, and then we'll allow you to submit a carryover. Now it's up to the IC whether they'll review it and whether they'll approve it or not. But systematically, we don't prevent it.
But wouldn't a carry forward request be submitted after the period end date?
So project period, not budget period. So if your project has come to an end and you wish to carry funds forward because you're doing a no-cost extension, then we'll allow you to do it. But when you're submitting the request, you're submitting it in the current budget period to carry funds over from a previous budget period. So
From any previous one?
any previous budget period. Yep. We just ask what the unobligated funds are that are being carried forward, and we don't validate this amount, so it's up to the institution to know how much they have available, and then it's up to the IC to review and approve or disapprove. Yes, ma'am.
Of T32s,
Uh-huh.
how do we manage the unliquidated obligations for the data conference? So do we include that amount for data conference into the carry forward request?
I'm not sure. I would ask the grants management specialist that's displayed across the top of your header for the for the carryover. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
I have a question pertaining to the no-cost extension.
Uh-huh.
Are the progress reports required? Because we have none at a time past. Is that something new?
So the progress, it's up to your IC as to the detail of the progress report. When we queried our institutes and centers, we got mixed, some of them wanted very detailed ones and some of them just wanted a summary progress report. It is a required upload. You'd want to talk to your grants management specialist to find out the detail, the level of detail. And remember, this is different than the no-cost extension that you do through the extension link and status, which doesn't really ask, it just asks for the months and then I believe a justification at this point, which is like a text field.
We don't even ask.
We don't even ask for that. Okay, never mind. So, yep. Yes?
Has there been any thought about allowing PIs or other users to create the post-award requests and then still having the ASRO submit them?
So we do get this feedback a lot. Right now, it's something that we've received, and we're working with policy to determine if and when. Yep. Anybody else? All right, excellent. And now I'm going to go ahead and introduce Scarlett Gibb, and I will let her. Well, really, she needs no introduction at this point.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to lead into, Neil is going to help me with this, Dr. Thacker. My part of this is really, really quick, because basically I'm just going to show you how we are going to start linking to actually Orchid to receive your IDs. We're going to make it really easy for you to get that and to actually create one if you want one. That part's easy, and I'm going to just give you a real quick overview of what we're going to be doing. I have some screenshots on that. So how many people here use Commons right now? Everybody? Yeah. So if you're a PI, you know in your personal profile currently we're displaying a place for an Orchid ID. How we're getting that is we're going to the MyNCBI at the National Library of Medicine, and if you've linked up with them, then we're pulling it in. And it's not a live link either. We're going out like weekly and pulling it in. So that isn't really very helpful. It's not bad. It does let us have it, but we'd rather be a little bit more real time. So what we're going to be doing, and when I say near future, is like after this meeting and everybody says, yeah, that looks good, we're going to go ahead and do it, we're going to be doing a real-time link, and we're going to be displaying it with an API to Orchid, pulling it in and showing it so that they'll be able to get it. And if they don't have one, or if they have one and it hasn't been linked to an NIH system yet, they'll be able to link it automatically themselves. And so this is what it's going to look like. So as you can see on the screen, the box around it, it says create or connect your Orchid ID. And if they click on that, we're going to go straight into the Orchid system, and it's going to say, your NIH is asking, NIH Commons is asking for access to your Orchid ID record, and then you can either log in, or you can start creating your own new one. And if you do that, then you can go ahead and start the process through Orchid. I'm not showing that. But if you have one, you just sign into Orchid. And this is my colleague, so don't use his name because he did it himself. And he logged in and linked up his Orchid ID. And as you can see, then automatically comes back and we display our Commons ID for you. So now you have that lovely feature too. And the Orchid ID. And that is really all there is to it. So does anybody, how do people feel about that? Does that look good to you? I'm getting thumbs up. Awesome. So that's what I'll take back and say we got thumbs up. Yay. Anything else? I mean, is there anything on that screen that you would change, move? Not don't talk about jobs and things like that because we're going to work on that later. But for Orchid ID, that looks good? Okay. So why are we doing that? Now I'm going to let Neil speak.
Thanks, Scarlett. So we've been hearing from you for years, very consistently, that we're asking you to enter a lot of data over and over and over again. And what we're also learning from you is that you have to enter these same data into lots of other systems over and over and over. And it's annoying. It's a waste of time. The data we get, we can't always use in the most efficient way. And so we've been trying to figure out a way to connect these data streams so you only have to enter it once. And what we've started with, this is sort of phase 2 of a multi-part, probably multi-year process. So the first thing we did was we created ScienceCV as essentially a report writer to harvest information from NLM systems about papers and publications and help you pull that information into a biosketch in whatever the format is of the agency that's using ScienceCV. We created then an integration with Orchid so you could pull publication data from Orchid into that biosketch as well, and that's been up for some time. Now we've started the ability to link the Orchid identifier into the ERA Commons, but we're not getting a lot of data from there. And so what we're trying to figure out now is how to tap into the Orchid data and use it efficiently. And so can we get data from Orchid to support other forms? So for example, the RPPR has some structured data collection about research products. Is that a possibility where we could harvest data from Orchid, where you collect your identifiers, you connect your accounts, and then you pull in what you want? Can we upload data from NIH into Orchid? And so some of the things that we have other ways of collecting research products and other kinds of information that people might want to or have to share on other systems, like with their faculty profile systems. And so this includes grant information, the name, the date, and so forth, the high-level information, most of which is public anyway. It could include things like other kinds of research products that Orchid may not be collecting yet. So you may want to list things that don't have DOIs but are research products. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but there are some. And Orchid is also at the same time always expanding its data model to capture more things that are coming into the family of research products. We now have preprints which have DOIs, data sets have DOIs, and so there are automated ways to do that. And then what we're also doing is we're talking with Orchid about the possibility of them expanding their data model so they can store a broader swath of data because their user base is much larger than ours. So they have 10 times the users that ERA does. And if they said, to the world, you want to store your profile information, the classes you teach, all your different kinds of research products on Orchid. We can serve as the neutral data hub. So all of the systems that people interact with can exchange data back and forth with Orchid, and then ERA could pull data in from Orchid as well. Again, only with the permission of the user. And so that's a way to streamline all this stuff, reduce burden, give higher quality data, not just to NIH, but all the other systems that you have to interact with as well. So we're in the early stages. Lori Haig, the director from Orchid, came and chatted with you guys at the last meeting. And we're moving forward on that. We're starting some discussions between them and us about how to get this going. She's talking about it with her board. We're talking about it with other funders. We're going to see if we can pull something together that's more efficient and streamlined than where we are now. Do you guys have any questions about that? Thoughts? Yes.
This looks tremendous, by the way. We have a really full-featured faculty profile system that there's also a large push to get people to use and maintain. We have publication harvesting, and we really do want to reduce faculty burden and not ask them to do things in multiple places. Do you foresee a way for systems like ours that actually does have an API already to make maybe a write call to whatever system, either MiniArray or we have to talk to Orchid, of course. But it's just hard to triangulate in my mind sort of to do that.
Right, and that's our vision. If you have a system that you like doing data entry in, you like managing in, or you're forced to use, then you stay in that system. And then when it comes time to take the information that's in your faculty profile system and get it into ERA to support an application, it's going to be very difficult for us to get those systems to talk together directly. But your system could talk to Orchid, Orchid could talk to us, and then we have that data interchange. So that's the model. How we get there from a technical perspective, I think we're going to have to spend a lot of time to figure out. That's where we want to go. Yes.
Seems the relationship between mentors and mentees could be tracked in Orchid and leveraged, or
I think so. Orchid has to comply with the privacy rules of every country, and that's very complicated. And so that means that for them to take anything with a name adds to the complexity. So they have some thoughts on how to do that, like maybe the information is stored somewhere else and they can call it or something, but it's much more complicated than I wish it could be. But I agree, that's a great, very important thing. And one of the things that's very interesting about Orchid is if you have the information in a structured format, you can start to think about measures for all the things that scientists do that don't get credit for. Orchid may give a way to get in there and do more than count papers in fancy ways, but actually look at quality, look at mentorship, things like that. Yeah.
I see the 3 phases there. Do you have a sense of time frame?
Well, we're in the middle of phase 3 now. We're sort of thinking about how to go about doing this, and phase 3 is pretty vague and open-ended, and as our thinking refines, we'll be able to give it a little more structure. But yeah, right now, we're in phase 3. We're in the future.
Neil, I'd ask how, we've had the working group here for Science CD at the FDP, like how can we help?
Well, that's really important, and the reason why we're doing this, I think, is because of the feedback that you guys have given us. This is your idea that we're trying to make work. So as we need to figure out some of the financing and see if we can get things officially started, and see if we can pull in other funders and data providers into the system, and I think we're going to be checking in with you guys periodically and asking for your advice. We're definitely going to need advice on data models and maybe systems that we need to prioritize in terms of trying to set up partnerships with and so forth. Anything else? All right, well, thank you. This is, every time I meet with you guys, you help us think this through, and for us it's very complicated, and we don't have a clear sense of all the other data requirements that you have outside of the NIH requirements. And so we really appreciate it.
Exciting times. So our last portion is going to be talking about ERA Commons partnerships and ERA partnerships, and Brad Hendricks is going to come up, and we're just tag teaming. So I'm going to let him speak to that. Thank you.
Good morning, how are you? My name's Brad Hendrick. I oversee the partner engagement team at ERA, PET team for short. It's an inside joke over at ERA. What we do is work with our partner federal agencies outside of NIH that use our systems to support their grants management business process. If you're familiar with the good old days of the grants management line of business, ERA was named as a HHS Center of Excellence within HHS that allowed us to cross-service agencies within HHS, as well as an alternate provider under the line of business, where we extended out and started providing services to other agencies outside of HHS. As you see here, some of our partner agencies include CDC, FDA, SAMSA, VA, DOD. And what we're finding is one of our largest partner agencies, SAMSA, actually has their entire grant workload is not research grants. They are non-research grants. So their business processes differ a little bit from what you may be familiar with. So over the past year, we've been implementing new functionality to support their non-research grants and grantees in terms of how they submit and process information. The first area I want to talk about is post-award amendments. In the non-research arena, basically awards are never revised. You'll get a new Type 1 award for your brand new grant project, and then that award will never be touched. It won't be revised. If a change needs to be executed, it's either requested from the grantee or the grants management staff will execute an amendment on their own, where basically they issue a new notice of award that documents the change. Something similar to a contracts methodology in terms of how they process contracts. So they will get an initial award and one or more what they call Type 6 post-award amendment awards throughout the budget period. And each of these amendments can be categorized into the different types of requests they're dealing with, such as budget revisions, carryover requests, no-cost extensions. So for the grantees, what SAMSA and some of the agencies want is the ability for these grantees to request these amendments. And so what we've provided is a way that the grantees in Commons will have, if you have a SAMSA grant, will now have access to a new menu tab called Non-Research. And under there will be a screen called Manage Post-Award Amendments. It's on this screen that the grantee can go in and they can find a listing for each of their non-research grant projects, which will display a row for each one, and some basic information about that grant. And then you'll notice a couple buttons there. We'll cover the View button in a minute, but basically Initiate. Here they can go ahead and initiate a post-award amendment request for the agency that the grant is with. And when they click that, they'll be prompted, as you see on the bottom right, of what type of amendment request are you looking to generate. And from there, it'll bring you automatically into the Assist module. If you're familiar with Assist, the online forms platform at ERA, where the grantee will automatically be presented with a customized application kit for that specific amendment request. And each amendment request can have different forms or required information that must be prepared and submitted. So just with Assist standard functionality, you'll see the forms and information across the top in tabs. Data will be pre-populated because it's tied directly to their grant records, and some of that data may be locked down because it comes from the grant records, for instance, project period and budget period dates, things like that. At that point, they could also run the standard validation process to identify any warnings or errors and fix any errors that are required prior to submission. So there's none of that secondary validation after submission. It's all done up front. These applications will go through grants.gov, so on the submission action, you will be prompted to enter in your AOR credentials to submit it, and it will pass through grants.gov and be transmitted back to ERA, where it'll automatically be linked back up to your grant record. Under the View screen, if you went into that View button, you would then have the ability to see all of your post-award requests, amendment requests that you have prepared or in progress that have been submitted throughout the life of your project period, the entire 5 or so years. And you'll see the basic information about it, and you'll see the current status. And the statuses you'll see is either submitted, in review, awarded, or disapproved. And if it's awarded, the federal agency will be issuing a Type 6 amendment notice of award to document that request and execute the change. And when that happens, you'll see a status change to awarded, and you'll see a link to the new notice of award, which then you could pull up and see. Any questions on the amendment process? It differs from prior approval. With non-research, you actually take an application kit, which has certain forms that are included and things like that. In the non-competing continuation area, grantees actually have to apply for each future budget period. It's not covered by RPPR or SNAP. Actually, they have to complete and submit a full application package, just like their original one for the brand new application they submitted. So this will contain forms from the standard non-research SF424 form set. And what happens is the federal agency will distribute the continuation application guidance to the grantees in advance of that current budget period ending, typically about 6 months before the end. And at that time, you would be able to go into the new screen for Manage Continuations, where again you'll see a record for each of your grant projects, and again an Initiate button, which would allow you to prepare and submit your continuation application. By clicking on the Initiate, again you'll be brought into Assist. Same concept of amendment applications. Data will pre-fill, it'll lock down, you can prepare all the forms and document uploads. You'll be able to validate, same exact process, and then submit. Again, on submission, going through grants.gov, you have to enter in your credentials. It'll come into ERA and be linked to your grant project records. Under the view screen for continuations, what we show here is what we call the continuation schedule. So if I have a 5-year grant, you will see one row for each future budget period that you are going to have under that grant. And what you'll see is basic information about open dates and due dates. So for each future year, you're going to see when your continuation application will open up, so you can start the application, and when it's due by. And then when they're submitted, you'll start seeing the information fill in for that year in terms of what the application is, the status, the application numbers assigned, as well as images to see the application. And again, you'll see a submitted, in review, awarded status. When awarded, again, you'll have a link to go ahead and access the continuation notice of award that's been issued. Now, in regards to these two applications, agencies have a need to request additional materials. They'll get the application, but they might need more information from you about that application. So what we've done is implemented a way where federal staff can go ahead and request that materials specific to one of those applications. And as grantee, you might get a request from either grant staff or the program staff. And if you get a request, you'll get an email notification which will contain the information of what's being requested, as well as information on where you can go prepare that documentation and submit it. The assigned PDPI and SO will receive that request, and you got to remember there'll be multiple requests. You could get multiple requests from grant staff, multiple requests from program staff, all related to that one application. So when you locate the request, you'll locate it on that same Manage Amendments or Manage Continuation screen, and you'll have the ability to initiate the response, complete the response, and submit it. And once submitted, the staff on the federal side will immediately be notified the submission's there so they can process the receipt of those materials. So what you'll see is, for instance, on that Manage Post-Award Amendment screen, if you go into View and you see a record of all your amendment applications, under the action link for one of those applications, you would see a RAM, Request for Additional Materials, action link. That will bring you to a screen where you can go ahead and enter comments and provide up to 10 files, and then you could save and work on it later or submit it immediately. In the header, you'll see the basic information about your grant as well as the specific application that you're dealing with. If it's an amendment, it'll show the type of amendment you're working with in terms of the application. Going one step further, we've also built in functionality to allow federal staff. Yes, that's the question.
Can I just clarify that you're still talking about SAMSA?
Non-research grants, SAMSA initially. Yes, all this functionality is going to roll out in October for all SAMSA grants. Are there any people in the audience that actually have SAMSA grants here? Or, oh, there's a bunch. Okay. So information about this new functionality coming out, again, it's going to be rolled out across all SAMSA grants in October. They're going to be setting up some training webinars to walk you through how to do this and everything, so you're prepared when the stuff opens up at that time. Grantee correspondence, we've implemented functionality to allow the staff to communicate with grantees. The ability for program or grant staff to send correspondence to the grantees. And if you do get one of these, you'll get an email notification which contains the contents of what that correspondence is. You'll have a link to go ahead and view it also. It'll be placed in your status information under the correspondence section where you'll be able to click the link for it and pull up the contents of what it is. The things with correspondence is not only is it just content about what they're trying to communicate to you, but also could include file attachments they're trying to distribute to you. Okay? This is only one-way correspondence, so you don't respond back to it. But like we talked a few minutes ago with the request for additional materials related to applications, they would appear here too. And that is what we call two-way communications, where you actually prepare a response for that request and submit it back. So these correspondence you receive could be requests for additional materials, where you're sending something back, or just one-way information being disseminated. The last item actually is terms and conditions. As you're well aware, terms and conditions are specified in the notice of awards that you receive. And what happens in the non-research world is they'll issue a brand new grant notice of award, and it might have 10 terms and conditions that apply, typically 40 in the SAMSA world. If you do a type 6 amendment to document a change, they might add 5 more, but they don't display the original 10 on that new amendment. They activate the new 5. So you got to know you have the 10 on the first one and the 5 on the second one, and overall you have 15 terms applicable to your grant for that support year. So what we've done is a way to provide a holistic view of what are all the terms and conditions for my award across my entire grant project period. One thing about this is, in status, you might see a new button that says View Terms Tracking. That will bring you into the new terms module, which grantees will now have access to go ahead and see what this view of the terms are for each grant. And it's organized by budget period. So across the top, you'll see a tab for each budget period. In this case, it's 2 support years. You're in your second one. You'll see a tab for the first year and a tab for the second. And as each year is awarded, additional tabs will pop up. And what we'll have is a consolidated list of all the terms that have been activated across all the awards for each budget period. And in each primary row, you'll see basic information about what the term is, including the term name, which you can click and see the content of what that term was. You'll see what award activated it and be able to pull up that notice of award to see it if you need a quick reference. And you'll see some other real-time status information about it. The key here is terms can now be tracked or not tracked. Not tracked at the bottom is just going to be one row giving you the basic term info, but there's nothing you really have to do about it. It's informational. You're just subject to the term or requirement, but there's nothing for you to submit or process. So you'll see the status is not tracked and no due dates are applicable. But if you do have a tracked term, you'll see an expansion area which will break out what is required for you to submit in terms of that term. You might have multiple tasks, which will be broken out by a sub-row, and it'll have a task description as well as a due date for when your documentation must be submitted. And again, you can have multiple tasks for each term. If you do prepare your documentations and submit it, it will start filling in that task row, showing you what files you've submitted or comments, as well as the current status of that term task. And it could be unresolved or resolved or closed. Sometimes they'll close a term because it's just no longer applicable. So for these track terms, under the action button, you might see a link called Prepare Documentation. It's going to bring you into a screen just like the other one, where request for additional materials, let's say. You'll have basic information about the grant and the specific term you're working on in the header. And you'll have the ability to enter comments and upload up to 10 files. Again, save and submit later or submit immediately. But once you submit, your assigned specialist will immediately be notified of the submission and they can start processing the documentation in regards to that term. What you'll also see is in status a new section called Award Terms. Here we're going to start also displaying some basic information about the terms for each award without having to go into the full tracking module. You'll see basic information of each term that was activated. And again, this is from the perspective of an award. Here's the terms that were activated on this award. It's not the comprehensive view across everything. So you'll see maybe the 10 terms for that award and the basic information as well as if it's tracked and what the current status is. But then again, if you need to actually see the full details across your entire grant, there will be a button there for the terms tracker that'll bring you into the full module where you can see that, manage that, and prepare submissions. Okay? Reminders, new functionality for non-research, initially SAMSA, coming out in October timeframe. Make sure to pay attention to those system emails. I know a lot of them go to junk or a separate folder and you ignore them because there's so many of them. Some of these could have requests for you that you need to respond to. So it's important to pay attention for some of those. And the titles will be descriptive, like it's a terms request or a request for an application. So pay attention to those a little bit. And make sure to respond quickly so it doesn't delay the processing of your application or removal of a term, things like that. Here's our little bubble guy saying thank you. If there's any questions. Oh, yes.
So when you're talking about things getting submitted, I'm assuming that's the SO submitting them or the DI?
So the PDPI and the SO can initiate these,
Okay.
and I believe both can submit them. Scarlett, that correct? I don't want to put you on the spot. I don't recall if it was the SO requirement.
For SAMSA, we did not have an SO requirement because a lot of the PDPIs have
The same, yes.
the same guy.
Right.
That's for non-research.
But that's only for the requests and the materials and terms. When it comes to those applications, you need to submit using your credentials at grants.gov.
Thanks.
There was another question. Maybe it was the same question. Anything else? That's all I got. Oh.
You're starting with SAMSA, are there other HHS agencies that are considering this?
At this time, no, but there are some non-research grants over at FDA and some of our other partners. Right now, this is all being developed by SAMSA and rolled out to them, and then it's available for other agencies to use. So at this time, it's not available, and you won't see it for other non-research grants. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you very much.